So let me tell you a story. There's this old man, and just like all of us, well, I don't call him an old man, that sounds kind of derogatory. There's an elderly gentleman, and just like all of us, he wants to take good care of himself. He wants to, do all those things you're supposed to do. So he goes to the doctor regularly. Every year he'll go for his annual physical. And he gets all the blood work and everything. And his doctor, every year when he goes, seems to tell him the exact same thing every single year. Cholesterol's kind of high. Your blood pressure is kind of high. You need to cut back on some of the fatty foods. You need to cut back on the salt. Maybe you should cut back on the smoking. And you should definitely cut back on your drinking. And every year the old man's like, yes, doctor. I'm not to imply that he's Malayali or anything. I'm saying, he's like, yes, doctor. And the doctor's like, okay. So he writes him a prescription and says, okay, go and be on your way. And he goes, and then the following year does the exact same thing. Comes back, gets his physical, gets a blood work, gets all of his different parts of himself examined. Hears the exact same thing from the doctor. Your blood pressure is still kind of high. Cholesterol is still kind of high. I see you haven't cut back on your smoking or your drinking. So we're going to have to do something about it. And then of course, the gentleman says, and the doctor writes my prescription, and he goes on his daily life. And if we know that person, if we knew, and maybe we do, maybe we know who that person is. Maybe that person is one of us. Maybe that person is us. And if we know that person, and you see this person doing the exact same thing over and over and over, going to the doctor, saying things like, I'm going to get myself healthy, yet completely ignoring everything the doctor says. Not really making any of the changes that he says he's going to make. And you're going to look at him and be like, how exactly do you expect to get healthy? How exactly do you expect that blood pressure to go down just by saying, yes, doctor, and walking out of the office? How do you expect any of that to happen if you go to your regular visits every year? What's the point of those regular visits? The point of the regular visits is that when you go to the doctor, he looks at you, does an overall health screening, if you will, and says, okay, well, these are some of the concerns that we have. Let's start addressing them. And then he gives us a prescription. Maybe it might be actual medication. Maybe it just might be a lifestyle change. But whatever the case may be, he's giving us a recommendation saying, well, these are the concerns that we have. How are we going to deal with those concerns? And then he says, okay, now I'm sending you out on your way to go take care of those things that we talked about. And it seems kind of pointless and even a waste of resources for someone to keep going back year after year, hearing the exact same thing from the doctor, but not making any changes in their life. But then, of course, one day, this man got into an argument with his wife. And in the middle of the argument, he felt a shortness of breath, and he felt a tingling down his left arm, and he felt to begin a cold sweat. And then he clutched his chest, and he had a moment. And right in that moment, if you think about it, people always say in those moments of great trauma, time kind of slows down. And in that moment, he slowed down and just thought for a second, is this it? Is this the end? Is this the way I go? Clutching my heart? Because I could have listened to my doctor? I could have done something? Is this what it's supposed to be? Many of us are in the exact same place where he is. And I'm not necessarily talking about our physical health. I'm talking about our spiritual health. And we come to church every single Sunday. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. And we make all these promises and say, okay, I'm going to make a change. And yet I go back to my life and do the exact same things over and over. That's the very definition of insanity. Have you heard that? The very definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting a change. We come to church, which is good. and we receive communion, which is great. But then once you receive that, we're supposed to go back and do something with it. Once you receive your doctor's prescription, you're supposed to go back and do something with it. Not add it, throw it in the drawer. Not just leave it there and be like, well, this is what my doctor said to do. I'm going to go do something else. Christ here is talking about the Sabbath. And he said something that's very, very important. He said the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And did you hear that? He said the Sabbath is made for man. And so a lot of us kind of look at that and be like, oh, the Sabbath is actually my day. Right? If it's made for man, I mean, it's my day, right? So maybe there's a Bears game today. Maybe there's something else that's more pressing. Maybe I have an exam to study for. So it's my day. It's my day to take care of all my business. But that's not what it means when he said the Sabbath was made for man. The Sabbath, and if you're a Jew, it's a Saturday, and if you're a Christian, it's a Sunday, right? Because we're a post-resurrection society. And so since Christ rose from the dead on Sunday, that's the Lord's Day. And so for us, the Lord's Day is Sunday. Because he doesn't end it there. If he ended it right there, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. You can end it there and go home. But he goes on and says, the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. It's his day. It's his day that he's allotted for you. It's his day that he's allotted for me, for all of us. Not so that we can miss church for studying for some exam. Not so we can leave church very, very quickly, or maybe even not come at all, for the sake of an early football game. I'm from Texas. I know love football games. We have a real football team where I come from. So I know what that feeling is like. Maybe one day when you get a real football team, you'll know what that feeling is like too. But that's what the Sabbath is made for. When you get to the kingdom, hopefully, and God is going to open up the book of records, and he's going to look, and he's going to say, he's not going to ask you, how many Bears games did you go to? How many Super Bowls did you watch? How many times on Saturday night did you go out hanging out with your buddies and get drunk? None of that is in there. Well, it is, but it's in the side where he asks the question, how many times did you miss church? How many times did you make other things in your life a priority over worship? How many times, instead of preparing yourself for Kurbana, did you decide to have a party and not dedicate the Lord's Day to the Lord? There's a reason why Sunday is called the Lord's Day. It's the Lord's Day. It's the time that we dedicate to him. And that preparation begins on Saturday night. And so, the reason why this day is set aside isn't for us, for our entertainment, isn't so that we can spend some time in the morning studying for some exam. I'm pretty sure those of our kids who decide to skip church for an exam, and the parents who let them, can really reconsider. And from between Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, if we're in church from 8:30 or 8:45 until, say, 12:30, it's about almost 4 hours, a little less. If you're in church for under 4 hours, there's not 4 hours between Friday and Saturday and Sunday evening that we could have set aside to do all the other stuff we needed to do, like shopping, or studying, or all those other things, rather than missing church for those 4.5 hours. 4.5 hours out of an entire week is not a whole lot of time. But that's all he's asking for. Set aside that time for God. Set aside that time for him, because it's his day. It's his day that he set aside for us, so it's our opportunity to set aside our time for him. And that's what he's going to ask us. Not what was the score of the last time, who knows if they're ever going to make the Super Bowl, but, what was the last time the Bears won a game? Who knows? He's not going to ask you those questions. He's going to ask you the questions, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was thirsty, did you give me to drink? When I was suffering, did you come and console me? Did we do the work that we're supposed to do on this day? Instead of doing whatever we wanted. That's the message of this day. The Sabbath was made for man so that we could build up that relationship with God. And so I pray that the Lord gives us the insight and the strength and to actually say no to those temptations and say yes to God and say yes to church and make this a priority, not what's going to happen in a few hours afterwards. All praise and thanksgiving be to the blessed Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one true God forever and ever.